So how does something like this happen? How does one questionable event drag an entire nation into a war that lasts for a decade? Well, that's exactly what we're going to dig into. We're looking at one of the most pivotal and, yeah, controversial moments in all of American history.
Okay, so picture this. It's August 1964. With a stroke of a pen, this single document gives one man, the president, the power to turn a conflict into an all-out war. And just like that, the course of American history was changed forever.
But here's the big question, right? Was this whole thing built on a lie? To figure that out, we've got to rewind. We have to go back to the event that started it all, the Gulf of Tonkin incident. All right, first up, let's look at what came out of this incident right away, the Gulf of Tonkin Resolution.
You know, this thing passed through Congress almost unanimously. And for the Johnson administration, it was pretty much a dream come true. You gotta remember, this is the height of the Cold War. Everyone's terrified of the domino theory, the idea that if one country falls to communism, they'll all start to fall. So this resolution, it basically gave them a blank check, a free hand. President Johnson himself privately joked it was like a grandma's nightshirt because, it covers everything.
So what was the official story? What did the White House tell Congress that made them hand over so much power? Well, the story the administration pushed was simple and honestly pretty alarming. They said they were two separate attacks. And this is the key word, unprovoked attacks by North Vietnam on U.S. ships just minding their own business on the high seas. And if you just look at the timeline they presented, it seems super straightforward, right? You have one attack, then a second one, and then, of course, a justified American response. Simple. But here's where it gets complicated. Because back on the destroyers out there in the Gulf of Tonkin, a totally different story was starting to unfold, especially about that second attack on August 4th. The first reports coming off the ships were, well, they were frantic. They painted this picture of total chaos, a fierce battle happening in the middle of the night in dark, stormy seas. But then you get this, a pilot, Commander James Stockdale, who was flying right over the battle. His take? He said, "I had the best seat in the house. Our destroyers were just shooting at phantom targets." He saw nothing, no enemy boats, just, as he put it, black water and American firepower. And get this, the doubt wasn't just coming from the air. It was coming from the command deck of the USS Maddox itself. The ship's own commander, Captain Herrick, sends a cable to his superiors basically saying, hold on a second. He's questioning his own reports, talking about freak weather, jumpy sonar operators, and he urges them to do a complete evaluation before any further action. So, you've got all this doubt coming directly from the people who were there. The big question is, what happened to that doubt when the message got to Washington? And this timeline, well, it's pretty revealing. You can see it right here. Captain Herrick sends his message saying, hey, I'm not so sure this happened. His boss, Admiral Sharp, tells the Secretary of Defense, McNamara, to maybe hold on retaliation. But what does McNamara do? He withholds those doubts from the president and orders the strikes anyway. And by that night, President Johnson is on national television telling the American people the second attack is a done deal, a fact. I mean, look at the difference here. McNamara is telling LBJ that highly classified information nails down the incident. But the reality? The guys on the scene were saying the exact opposite. They were full of doubt. He presented it as a certainty when it was anything but. And that decision, a decision based on, let's face it, distorted and incomplete information, well, it would unleash consequences that were nothing short of catastrophic. That Gulf of Tonkin resolution, it became the legal backbone for a war that would drag on for almost a decade. And in the end, it would cost more than 58,000 American lives. And as staggering as that number is, the human cost for the Vietnamese people was unimaginable. Over 3 million lives lost, including an estimated 2 million civilians. Just an incredible toll. It took decades, but the truth did eventually come out. In 2005, the National Security Agency, the NSA, finally declassified an internal report that laid it all bare. It was the final nail in the coffin. What did the report say? It concluded that officials had basically twisted the facts. The historian who wrote it found that intelligence signals had been messed with and that evidence was cherry-picked. They were looking for proof to support a conclusion they'd already decided on. So, okay, this all happened over half a century ago. Why are we still talking about it? Why does it still matter so much today?
Because the fallout was massive, and it went way beyond the battlefield. I mean, this was the legal green light for the whole escalation in Vietnam. It created this huge credibility gap. People just stopped trusting what the government was telling them. And it raised these massive questions about checks and balances, about whether a president can just wage war without Congress. It really became this painful benchmark, a reference point we still talk about every time military action is on the table.
And so it leaves you wondering, doesn't it? Just think, if the real story had been told back on August 4th, 1964, how different would our world be today? It really makes you think about the true cost of a lie, especially when the stakes are literally war and peace.